Hello everyone and welcome! I've once again got the 125th scale RC General Lee back on the bench. My goal with this series is to recreate some of the jumps and stunts seen in the show The Dukes of Hazzard, just in 125th the size. The last time I had this car out, I did some test jumps. As you may recall, the jumps were a little underwhelming to say the least. While overall the jumps were okay, and I was pleased with the surprising amount of abuse that the car could take, the jumps were not nearly big enough, so clearly some changes needed to be made. If you're new to this project, be sure to check out the playlist linked below in the description, where you can see this car being built and the first jump attempts. But with that said, let's dive back into this project. So to be able to jump the car further, the car is going to need to be faster. At least that was my solution. I mentioned at the end of the previous video, my plan was to install a much higher speed brushless motor. This 11,000 kV motor is probably a little overkill, but it's what I had in my parts bin, so that's what's going in the car. To mount it to the chassis though, I was going to need to design a motor mount, which I did using Autodesk Fusion 360. Based on the dimensions of the motor, I created a simple sort of mock-up, and then I just positioned it on the chassis and created the mount. Now this is probably a good time to say that I really don't recommend using brushless motors with a FFR SC1 chassis or anything with an M810 axle. This whole little General Lee series seems like it's going to be a lot of do as I say, not as I do situations, since I really don't want people following along with me and tearing up their cars doing jumps and who knows what else. Some people certainly have had success, and that's great, but due to just how scale these chassis are, anything like this motor is just way overkill. And unless you enjoy rebuilding axles the size of cigarettes, stick with the smaller, slower, less powerful motors. With that said, I have posted the STL file on Patreon. I don't really recommend using it, like I said, but I don't know, it's there, have fun I guess. After the design was complete, of course it was time to print it, and it turned out pretty nice. It goes right in place of the old motor mount, which I had to remove. This motor is a little taller than the N20, so I needed to make some slight adjustments. No big deal, you can barely even tell, and I of course continued with the brushless conversion by installing a brushless ESC. Here's how the chassis looked once complete. And here's how the chassis looked once I realized that I had to swap out both the receiver and ESC to get the car working properly for some reason. I won't bore you with all the details, but all you need to know is that the car works. Not really sure what the issues were here, but the silver lining is that this ESC can go up to a 3S LiPo battery, which could certainly be interesting. But hey, all that's left to do now is to install the battery, and it's ready to jump. Now, despite the almost incalculable amount of time and effort spent making the test ramp in the last video, some of you doubted its greatness and recommended that I build something better. In all seriousness, the ramp had some give and would move when the car drove over top. This certainly could have contributed some to the less than acceptable jumps, so I 3D printed a very simple ramp that will be solid. It's maybe a little steeper and taller than what I needed, but go big or go home, right? Now earlier while the ramp was being printed, I test drove the car. One of the downsides of a non-censored brushless motor is that they tend to lag or cog at lower speeds. You just can't drive this car around smoothly at lower speeds like you can with the brushed motor that I had installed before, but that's not really going to be an issue for jumping the car. Also, for some reason, this motor has like no torque, which is strange. The car is light and has very little roll resistance. In fact, even with the battery installed, I can literally blow on the car and push it from one end of the workbench to the other, just blowing on the thing, so I don't really know what the motor is complaining about, but it's old and I've probably cooked it once or twice without remembering, so whatever, at least it works. With my driving skills in top form and the glue dry on the ramp, you know what's next. The stage was set. Now 2 changes this time around. I gave myself a little more runway by placing the ramp further back, and I positioned the cloth behind the ramp to soften the landing. Unfortunately, one would prove to be unnecessary and the other ineffective. Somehow the car survived this without any issues, and this jump wasn't even close to full throttle. Clearly, the car can now do some more serious jumps. This is much more like the result that I was looking for. Now remember, the goal here is to try to recreate the real thing as accurately as I can, not just throw the car as high and as far as possible, so this is obviously more than capable of doing what I want. This isn't even close to full throttle, as I said. I did quite a few jumps, and I started to get better at sort of pitching the car with the throttle. I was actually really surprised by just how much difference hitting the throttle in the air could make, but I wanted to try to either land the car flat or land it on the rear axle, which by the end I think I was starting to get pretty good at. As far as the damage report, I did lose the drive shaft a couple times, and I once again lost the front push bar. But other than that, it's still holding together. How come the nice cars that I'm always careful with break when this thing is doing jump after jump and somehow coming out alive? In fact, I don't even think there's a single scratch on the body. There is quite a bit of play in the steering. I have no idea what could be causing that. I'll want to address this at some point, but other than that, I'm ready for what's next. And what is next? Well, I'm not exactly sure, to be honest. I've got a few ideas, but we'll see. I've posted a link in the description to one jump from the show that's been on my mind recently. I think it would be a cool one to try to recreate, and not really too challenging, but I'm going to have to build some props for it, and I'd like to find some sort of really weak wood or wood-like material that the car can easily smash through, so that might take a little R&D. If any of you have some ideas, please let me know. To conclude today's video, I want to showcase some of the awesome vehicles and projects that have been showcased over on the Make It RC Facebook group. I hope you really enjoyed these 2 testing videos. Sorry about the low quality video. It's just being that these are tests, I didn't really feel like bringing out the lights and really going full Hollywood just yet. But certainly for the actual recreation jumps, there's going to be a lot more effort put into the filming of that. Big thanks to everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I will see you next time.